So West Bank, Gaza, Iraq,
some sort of plan.
Syria, Lebanon, all places where U.S. foreign policy touches at the behest of Israel see the destruction of Christian communities.
Right.
I'm guessing that's like not an accident.
So recently, Tucker Carlson exposed Israel's campaign for regional domination, the Greater Israel Project, and what ramifications that has for U.S. foreign policy and the Middle East in general. This is in the context of a conversation with Mother Agapia Stephanopoulos. She's a nun that lived in Palestine for many years in a Muslim community. So let's get Tucker's take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
I lived in D.C. for all this, but like at the final decade of the Cold War, there were a lot of Jews in the Soviet Union who were being persecuted. Well, everyone in the Soviet Union was being persecuted, including the Jews.
Right.
And
they came to Israel?
Yeah, they came to Israel. They came to the United States, and there were Jewish groups in the U.S. and in Israel that I supported then and I support now who said, we got to get our people out of there and help them. They were called refuseniks.
Right. Yep.
And my dad worked in this, actually. And I thought that was great.
Sure.
You don't see that with any Christian group with Christians in the Middle East. There's no Christian group in the United States that I'm aware of. It's like, hey, those are our people. Maybe we should help them.
No, they are. In fact, there was just a conference down in Atlanta. There's something called Churches for Middle East Peace. And there's a group like Telos Group. There's Christians for a Free Palestine, but they're very small and they're not so much part of the institute, the hierarchy of the church. But we had Pope Francis did speak out. And I think certainly the Catholic Church in America has to do a lot more as an institution. I mean, we should have a Christian AIPAC group. Of course, going on.
Like you're not allowed to shoot up the Church of the Nativity. Sorry. No. I mean, even if you're agnostic on the politics of it or whatever, which is fine.
And I think he's referring to the 2002 siege on the Church of Nativity, but they're right. If anything, there should just be one uniform standard for foreign lobbies like AIPAC, and presumably the best thing is for there to be no foreign lobbies, especially ones that don't have to register under FARA like AIPAC does. That's why AIPAC wields so much control. But yeah, he's right. There isn't that much political energy, it seems, behind Christian groups that have a problem with the Christians killed by the IDF, which has happened in fairly large numbers for such a small populace of Christians in Palestine. But even Justin Amash had direct family members hiding out in a church when the IDF dropped bombs on it and killed a newborn baby that was in his family. So this is not a conspiracy theory. This is true. And there doesn't seem to be that much attention on it. It's all outweighed by, the propaganda we're fed about how Israel has a right to defend itself, 22 months after October 7th. So yeah, this is a topic that needs a lot more concentration and a lot more focus, especially among Christians that, have to care about people, that believe that, everyone has an opportunity to seek out Christ, and, killing people's wrong no matter who those people are, because the Jew and the Gentile and all of humanity has the opportunity to seek out Christ. That's the general idea anyway.
Maybe preferable, but you can't do that to Christians. How about no?
I agree 100%. So we have to move to that. But again, it gets back to the thing though, is that people don't always see the whole story. And we're just flooded with this message that those terrorists are coming to get us next, which is absurd. Has any member of Hamas or anybody of Palestinian come and threatened America as an American? No, that's not what they're about. The thing is but that's the tactic that's used, is that we have to plaster them as being these jihadists when they're nothing like that.
I mean, same thing with Hezbollah, man. Hezbollah and Hamas hasn't exactly threatened the United States or been in the position of threatening the United States, but yet the United States dumps so much money, ostensibly, so that Israel can defend against those people and those terrorist groups. Well, it isn't exactly defense that they're doing in Gaza, is it? This is a crusade, a genocide that they're committing against those people. Such was the war versus Iran on behalf of the Israeli regime, claiming, hey, they support Hezbollah. But Hezbollah didn't exactly attack the United States, did it? I default to Ron Paul and Pat Buchanan's foreign policy, which is truly America first. It's non-intervention.
Are they, I'm sure you've dealt with Hamas or know people who are, right? Are they religious fanatics? Are they jihadis?
Not the people that I know. Like I said, when I was again in at the school, we had a couple teachers, Muslim men, and there were some elections going on. And it wasn't Hamas then. It was the social party or something. It was definitely a Muslim religious party. I would have voted for those guys because they weren't corrupt. They wanted to serve their people, and that's what it was about. So I'm not saying it doesn't happen anywhere. I'm not totally ingrained in the community, but the vibe there isn't one of wanting everybody to convert to Islam and forcing it upon them at all. And the purpose of Hamas is primarily to resist and to protect their people and their land.
It's not just Palestine and Israel where the Christian population has shrunk. It seems like throughout the Levant.
Yes. And I think that's part of the whole Greater Israel Project. Isn't it so ironic that they've made such a big thing?
Targeting Christians.
Targeting Christians, yeah. Well, targeting to make control for Israel, for example, in Syria. I went to Syria in 2004, and I went to the convent of St. Thecla, where outside of Damascus, in Malula, where the nuns were kidnapped by ISIS, right? And the population is over 10% Christian, and you have ancient Christian sites as well as vibrant monastic communities there and vibrant churches and hospitals that were run by the church in Syria and Lebanon, right? And now, what have we done? And so Assad wasn't perfect. Saddam Hussein wasn't perfect. But the Middle East is not the United States. And we tried to impose ourselves there and get rid of these governments who, for all the repression, also kept the people together, allowed minorities to survive.
And that's the key there. This is so backward that which country improved in that regard in terms of protection for religious minorities after U.S. intervention? It was literally none. She cited two good examples there, Syria and Iraq, that were more or less secular dictatorships. They weren't, the kind of ideal governments even fans of government point to in any respect, but at least they protected religious minorities. And you're seeing the disaster unfolding right now in Syria as, the Druze are persecuted and Christians are persecuted, some to their deaths, by this new leader, the former emir of Al-Qaeda, founded the Al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria, Jelani al-Shara, as he's sometimes called. And that's the fruits of U.S. intervention. And notice what they said earlier about Hamas, how its primary role is as a resistance group. You can say that, and that can be true, without subscribing to the barbarism that are some of Hamas's terrorist attacks, because I think those are indefensible. I'm sorry. October 7th, that attack was indefensible, but it is part of a long struggle against Israel and the Greater Israel Project and the schemes that were used to sell the mass land redistribution project as part of the original creation of Israel in 47 and 48. So people act like history began, on October 6th, 2023, but no, this was part of a long-standing struggle. It's not to justify the murderous activities of Hamas, but that's just plain reality. The same is true about 9/11. They didn't attack us because of our freedom. As Ron Paul said, they attacked us because our government was over there. We had militarized the Arabian Peninsula, supported Israel, and dumped, tons of sanctions onto the Iraqi regime, starving multitudes. So this is remarkably similar in that respect. Doesn't mean that you have to sympathize with Al-Qaeda to admit the truth.
There.
Including Christians.
Yeah. And Christians, yeah. And just recently, and so I find it mind-boggling that now we take sanctions off after Assad is gone, and we put in place someone who was Daesh, who was part of ISIS. Does a leopard change its spots?
And how are the Christians in Syria
we had the bombing.
That?
We had the very, if you may, I'd like to look for the statement from Patriarch John of Antioch, whose brother was a bishop and was kidnapped in 2010 and presumed to be dead now. And in June, there was a suicide bombing in the church in Damascus, Mar Elias. And Patriarch John, he didn't pull any punches. He came and he said he gave a eulogy, but he also called out the government because they didn't really condemn the act at all, the ISIS government. And he says, Apostle Paul, in his epistle to the Romans, for whether we live to the Lord, and whether we die to the Lord. The rock of our faith is the Lord who rose from the dead, And the martyrs who lie before us today are children of the resurrection. They dwell in the divine light. They did not die. They are alive. They have passed on, even if in this horrific way, to the one whom they loved. He's living like we're supposed to live as Christians, is talking at it, the Christians there. But
yeah, and I think they're referring to Israel's bombing of Damascus in July, something that, caused concerns about destabilization in the region. But again, this isn't part of kind of a defensive maneuver. This is part of the Greater Israel Project because Israel has laid claim to parts of southern Syria and parts of Lebanon and I think parts of Jordan as part of the Greater Israel Project. And the idea is to expand the West Bank settlements into those regions. And that is what is being decried here. There's no justification for it, especially amongst Christians. Christian Zionists will somehow, sometimes argue for this, but there's no biblical substantiation for this whatsoever.
Then he says, but I will say boldly, Mr. President, Abu Jalani Ashara, the former head of HTS, head of the ISIS group, we deeply regret, Mr. President, that in the immediate aftermath of the crime, not a single government or state official was present at the scene except for Mrs. Hind Kabawat, a Christian. We regret that deeply. We are an integral component of this nation, and we are here to stay. Let me remind you, the two archbishops of Aleppo, Bulus and Johanna, were kidnapped, and much was said at the time. The Malula nuns were also kidnapped, and here we still are. This heinous crime was committed the day before yesterday, and we will remain here. We appeal to you, Mr. President, for a government that does not get distracted by issuing unnecessary decisions unworthy of mention from the sacred royal door. We call for a government that takes responsibility and shares in the suffering of its people. Mr. President, the people are hungry. If some have not told you, I am telling you, honorable, come and take care of your people. I think that's pretty bold for a guy who had his brother kidnapped, just had a number of parishioners bombed, and he's telling someone who has been known to be a terrorist, calling him out.
That's pretty bold.
It's pretty bold.
I would say that's pretty bold.
Yeah.
Pretty bold and pretty true, if you ask me. I mean, this is just all the ramifications of U.S. empire building schemes and U.S. support for Israel over the years. I mean, this sort of situation is unavoidable when this criminal regime behaves in that way. And by the way, I think my government is a criminal regime too, especially for having supported this nonsense over and over again at the behest of Israel over American interests, such as they did in Iran, where, hey, we could have negotiated with Iran. Iran was willing to negotiate, and they never switched their position regarding in a new inspections regime for their nuclear facilities. They had a nuclear energy program. We could have curtailed enrichment thresholds that they went above. But instead, you bomb Iran and then give them unlimited incentive to fast track a nuke, like North Korea did. And I don't blame North Korea for doing that. I wouldn't blame the Iranians for doing that after they got bombed by the U.S. and Israel, and it was clear they didn't want a war. Same thing goes for meddling with Syria. Israel just wants a fragmented regime there, just as they did with Lebanon, so that they can take more territory in the interest of the Greater Israel Project.
So the government of Syria now, the government run by the former ISIS leader, is pro-Israel.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the whole plan. And, when you get to it, they talked about from the river to the sea, right? Where did that statement come from? Look at the charter of Likud, the party of Netanyahu. They very clearly say from the Jordan to the Mediterranean is going to be Israel.
Yeah, it says Israel will be sovereign. This is exactly right, and it's a point not often brought up, that Hamas borrowed that language from a precursor in the 1977 Likud Charter, which says, from the Mediterranean to the Jordan River, Israel will be sovereign. It's the same language, but you always hear that as just, a propaganda jibe against Hamas and wrapping up all Palestinians in that, of course, because, to them, Palestinians are indistinguishable from Hamas, and say, hey, look, these are terrorists. They have bad, inclinations. They have bad plans. They have evil, maniacal schemes where, Likud has that same scheme on the inverse, but we're just supposed to funnel money into Israel regardless. This is an awesome point. I'm so glad she's bringing it up.
And really from the Nile to the Euphrates, which means going into Iraq, into the edges of Egypt.
Yeah, part of the Greater Israel Project and some of the maps held up, including one by Netanyahu one time, shows that part of that territory extends into Sinai. So some of the Zionists want part of Sinai. That's a large part of Egypt. So again, she's not wrong about that.
And up to so that's why we had the war in Iraq. Why did our young people have to die? Why did we have to spend so much money on a war? I was supposed to visit Iraq in early 2000s. Our school secretary, her father was born in Mosul, and he was a Syrian Christian. And so this is an opportunity to go and visit him. And that's when they started chopping off the heads and doing things. So we thought better of making that part of the trip. But how many Christians were displaced from Iraq during that time?
Almost all of them.
Almost all of them. And now in Syria, you're seeing the same thing, which in 2004, I saw vibrant communities. I saw people who could live, even under Assad, as Christians. Now, they're in fear for what's going to happen to them.
I mean, it's hard to see this as an accident. So West Bank, Gaza, Iraq,
some sort of plan,
Syria, Lebanon, all places where U.S. foreign policy touches at the behest of Israel see the destruction of Christian communities.
Right.
I'm guessing that's like not an accident.
No, not at all.
Yeah. I mean, I'm guessing the same, and this goes back to the very early Zionists like Theodore Herzl and David Ben-Gurion. You know, Ben-Gurion not really a super early Zionist, but it goes back a long way, and they were not shy about the fact that it would take the commitment of atrocities to gain and actualize this idea and conception for Greater Israel. And if you don't believe me, go back and read some of Herzl's and Ben-Gurion's comments on this. Ben-Gurion himself wrote a long essay on this that I think was only in Hebrew. I don't think it's ever really been translated officially into English, but you can still access it. Mearsheimer has pointed this out recently, that talks about exactly that, and that is true of Syria. Now, you know, Assad has to watch out that he's not too conciliatory toward Israel and the United States, even though, you know, he's met with leaders of both countries recently. He allowed them to use airspace in their war versus Iran, etc., especially because some of the diehard Al-Qaeda guys, you know, former rebel fighters with him, would like to chop his head off if he's too conciliatory. So he's in a balancing act now. But it really shows the absurdity and really treasonous nature of U.S. foreign policy, where arms and money was funneled through U.S. aid to ISIS and Al-Qaeda just to depose Assad, a guy who, whatever you have to say about him, how criminal he was, how authoritarian he was, how totalitarian he was, he actually did respect and protect religious minorities like the Christians and Druze to a far greater extent than they are being treated now. And the Alawites, you know, Assad was an Alawite. That's a Shia minority. So that's where we're at. The Greater Israel Project marches on, no matter, you know, how little exposure it gets in the United States. People are waking up to this more and more, I think, now, because it's unavoidable in the context of this genocide in Gaza and the expansion of West Bank settlements taking place at the same time, Israel's bombing of Damascus. All these things play into this. And really, the writing's been on the wall for a long, long time. But the narrative is shifting a little bit, especially among figures on the right that I think are opening their eyes to it. Tucker Carlson's one of those. I'm glad he had this mother on to tell her tale, to tell her story, her experiences. And I can tell she's pretty well studied in these issues and these events. So, hey, we need more of this. Expose this, get people's eyes on this, and, you know, Christians waking up to the atrocities against Christians in Gaza, because there are those too. And that's what we're living with now through the Israel First mentality. That's the natural result of it. But I do want to hear from you down below. Is Tucker Carlson right? Is what's happening in Gaza now and the West Bank and Syria all part of the Greater Israel Project? Is there anything you disagree with? Where do we go from here as U.S. citizens? Do we just have to hope for a sea change politically eventually and AIPAC loses influence? Let me know in the comments down below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Tucker also. He is great, and I love his coverage on stuff like this. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can help support the channel, and in return, I'll give you access to all of my videos that on YouTube before they go live to the general public. You'll have advanced viewing of those. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, no more empire, and in Gaza, no more genocide. And until I see you guys next time, take it easy. Peace out.